everyone. Welcome on this Wednesday evening. We are here for the People's Tribunal. We're going to talk about debt in DC. We're going to allow some time for people to kind of flow in over the next few minutes. So we're going to play a musical intro for everybody. I'm going to speak quickly about who's going to be singing for us. We have a video of a musician named Ben Grosscup. He uses the power of song to accentuate the ideas and values of the justice-based resistance movements he's a part of. His mission in life is making music a vibrant part of these movements. Drawing upon activist folk singing traditions, he brings new songs to the places where they're most relevant. He works with unions and other social justice organizations to raise political consciousness while singing together for a common purpose. He performs a wide range of politically inspired music, much of it original. He's based in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and Ben serves as the executive director of the People's Music Network, a diverse community of singers, artists, activists, and allies that cultivate music and cultural work as a catalyst for a just and peaceful world. Since the pandemic began, PMN has gone from running in-person events in the Northeast United States to running online events that feature PMN members as well as non-member comrades in song from all over the world. So again, this is Ben Grosscup, who has a song for us.
Revolutionary greetings to the Debtors Collective and the Poor People's Campaign. My name is Ben Grosscup. I'm the Executive Director of People's Music Network. I'm very sorry I was unable to attend the Debtors Assembly live today. We have a big event coming up this coming weekend, but I'd like to share with you this pre-recorded song instead. Well, this song was first written by Merle Travis back in 1946. Here's how it sounded back then. You load 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. Well, for generations, coal miners were paid not in cash, but in scrip. This scrip was redeemable only at the company store. You see, as a worker, your life was directly controlled by your employer, not just while you were working the mine, but when you came home for a meal, knowing your food could come from just one place. For it, you had to go into debt. Some things change and others stay the same. So I've updated this song for today's generation of debtors. Some people say you gotta get a degree, and after 4 years you have to pay back the fees. Now I'm paying my fees out on my own. How am I ever gonna pay back my student loans? You go to 4 years of college, and what do you get? Another diploma and a mountain of debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I must stay. I owe my soul to Sally Mae. I borrowed for school so I could get smart. I studied my books and I did my part. I took a full load of English and biology, and then I got a job serving coffee and tea. You go to 4 years of college, and what do you get? Another diploma and a mountain of debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I must stay. I owe my soul to Sally Mae. The collector kept calling and he taunted and lied, but I couldn't pay no matter how much I tried. I owed so much, it felt like a joke. To pay back my loans, I'd forever be broke. You go to 4 years of college, and what do you get? Another diploma and a mountain of debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I must stay. Oh, my soul to Sally Mae. Now they garnish my wages in the court's decree. The debt follows you even after bankruptcy. Who will carry my burden when I'm dead and gone? For my student debt will still live on. You go to 4 years of college, and what do you get? Another diploma and a mountain of debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I must stay. I owe my soul to Sally Mae. Dreams can wither from neglect and delay, working jobs that you hate for a debt you can't pay. But if everyone who's worn the cap and gown stopped paying our debt, we take Sally Mae down. Then for 4 years of college, what could you get besides all that knowledge that you'll forget? How about a better world for you and for me, where higher education's universal and free? Where higher education is universal and free.
Awesome. Okay, well, welcome everybody. That was Ben Grosscup that was singing for us just then. He's with the People's Music Network in Massachusetts. So big shout out to him. And welcome to everybody. This is the People's Tribunal. My name is Hope Lloyd. I have about $70,000 in student debt. And we are going to talk this evening about debt in DC. First, I want to pass it to Ampson for a quick land acknowledgement.
Hi, everybody. We acknowledge that the city of DC and the broader Potomac and Chesapeake region are built on stolen and unceded Anacostan, Piscataway, and Pamunkey lands and waterways by white imperial genocidal settlers who forcibly removed these indigenous peoples. Now, these groups were the caretakers of these lands and waterways that comprise DC, which have also come to be the lands on which enslaved Africans toiled and died. It's important to acknowledge these lands and their histories as they remind us of our relation to them, as well as to our responsibility as stewards of these lands in the midst of continued indigenous genocide. And while these lands and waterways, homes of current national parks as well, were the spaces where the Piscataway, Pamunkey, the Nantego, Mattaponi, Chickahominy, Monacan, and Powhatan cultures thrived, colonialism, genocide, war, and disease over the past few centuries have decimated those populations and groups. However, several of these indigenous groups that originally occupied the space, including those that have merged with larger regional tribes such as the Piscataway and the Lenape, they continue to do so. They continue to live in these spaces today. So to contribute to the ongoing efforts of these communities, these extant communities, you please feel free. I implore you to contact the Piscataway Kanoi tribe, the Pamunkey Indian tribe, and the Nanticoke Lenni Lenape tribal nation about ways you can learn about their cultures, histories, and contribute to their community initiatives. And we have links to these groups, and we can distribute those to you all later. So thank you.
Thank you, Ampson. Hello, everyone. I'm Hope. And we, first, I guess I'll share about who we are. We're the Debt Collective, and we're also hosting this event with the Poor People's Campaign DC. We of the Debt Collective represent a broad community of peoples who oppose debt and are organizing to end debt. The Debt Collective believes that when we face these debts alone, they're a burden, but when we come together, they make us powerful. The Debt Collective is building a debtors union where people in debt and our allies can use our collective power to fight for better conditions in our financial lives and a more equitable society. We can fight for things like the cancellation and renegotiation of debts, access to publicly funded goods, and anti-racist economic policies, and much more. We believe that debt in all of its forms, including student debt, medical debt, carceral legal debt, and housing debt, are unjust forms of exploitation. And the public goods for which we go into debt, like education, medical care, housing, and legal protection, should be free and reparative for everyone. And I'm going to pass the mic to Zilla if she would introduce us to the Poor People's Campaign.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Zilla Wesley. I am one of the chairs of the DC Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And we are really here to start changing and shifting the narrative that's out here about our poor, about ourselves who are poor and low income and who are really impacted people. We try to represent the 140 million, and I'm using plus now due to COVID, because COVID just put a big ass highlighter on problems that people were facing on a daily basis. And even in the DC area, it's over 200, it's, oh God, I'm sorry, I'm having a brain fart. Over 100,000 so low income people in DC, but then in reality, I mean, I say it's more than that because it's our siblings who were taken away from this area and put in to the federal prisons around the country for years. It's our siblings who are homeless and who are not being counted, or unhoused who are not being counted. It's our people whose roots to in DC, but by force, they had to be moved to the suburbs and surrounding areas, and they're not necessarily counted, but I still claim them because they are DC residents as far as I'm concerned. So that's one of the things that we are trying to do, is shift the narrative, uplift that, change policies, because Poor People's Campaign, we're nonpartisan, but we are deeply political, and it's time for us to call up and rise together. Thank you.
Hi, Ampson again. Just here to give you all a intro into the event that we've all convened here for this evening. The People's Tribunal, this event is a moment in a space in which we can come together, share our experiences with debt, listen to how debt affects our communities and our futures, and just exist in community with one another as we agitate for the elimination of debt overall. We have several speakers who will help us understand the various forms of debt that we're living with. And after hearing from those speakers, who we're so glad to have join us tonight, we'll share some questions with the group, spend some time in smaller breakout groups, such that we can share experiences together in smaller groups and our relations to debt. After some time in these groups, we'll reconvene as a bigger collective, and we'll debrief and have some closing remarks. So right now, take a moment to actually introduce these speakers, and we'll passing the mic over to them.
All right, first we're gonna ask Zilla to speak, and so I'll introduce Zilla. Zilla Wesley II is a native Washingtonian. She loves working in the DC community. Zilla has returned to college at the University of the District of Columbia to complete her bachelor's in political science. Zilla will be graduating in May 2020. Ooh. She is enjoying working with the Poor People's Campaign. She's laughing because she graduated last year. She is enjoying working with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, and in the DC community. Zilla started working with the Poor People's Campaign in the winter of 2017. Zilla is one of the chairs of the DC Poor People's Campaign, and working with them has made her a better organizer, and she loves DC. So thank you, Zilla. Zilla's going to share with us about housing debt tonight, also, I should say.
Perfect. Y'all, I'm sorry about that. I should have read it before I sent it. That's really my bad. Y'all, because it's been a crazy week. It's a lot happening in this world, so please forgive me for that. So yeah, let's start with a broad picture. We all know that we're in a pandemic. Yes. We all know that we are, so United States wise, 90% of households own 70% of debt in the United States. Like that's a lot of people if we just let that sink. Oh, wait, I'm gonna start my timer, y'all. Sorry. Go on. 70% of debt. 7.6% of people are unemployed right now in the District of Columbia. But that's unemployed. That doesn't mean that they're underemployed or part-time jobs. Like we need to like look at that employment status, because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, like the job market's on the uprise, or like point something jobs are gross. But what does that really mean? You know, because usually you're undertimed, or you're just enough that you barely can make it. Because even if we like break that down like housing wise, so at 2018 minimum wage, you would have to work 91 hours to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in DC. So that's one person per workday, and that's one job just to really afford it. And that doesn't account for food, bills, utilities. Just that's a place for you to lay your head. And that's without even furniture, any of that. So that would mean for you to really have a real comfortable, healthy life here in the District of Columbia, you would need to make over $30 an hour. Like, and because that's why people are like, oh, $20 is cool. Yeah, like for some places, yeah, that's cool. But like for the District of Columbia, that's not really going to help with anything. And then I just want to uplift this, is that we are in a pandemic, right? And people are still getting evicted. So if you see somebody or know somebody who is getting evicted, that is illegal to do. So like call them out, call the landlords their protections. We need to use that and get that information out there, because people are still getting notices. The mental aspect of that is really even still harsh for people. We've known nationwide that the states that already started rolling back has led to over 10,000 deaths in coronavirus, because people are staying with their families, spreading, and people are dying. So like all of that we need to watch out for. So credit card debt in DC now is about 90%. And this is for a few reasons. One, people are buying food on credit cards. People are now buying, putting their utilities on their credit cards, all of that. Also there's new ways, because we don't necessarily have payday loans anymore, but like card companies like PayPal, Cash App, all of that are now giving people loans to, as long as you have some type of income coming in, of like up to $200, $300, but it's still one where it's like you still have to use some type of credit in a way to really get over and get by and get what you need to do. And that's also what's happening, because we are in a time where food and gas keeps going up, but incomes are not. So that's really why people are in debt and doing what they need to do. Because I just even know the bills of this time, because my mom retired, the retirement people took a long time paying her bills, so I had to pay the bills, and they have gone up just in service fees and like random other fees, 1 to 10% depending on the bill. And some stuff we're not even doing, because our gas went out because we had a gas leak. And come to find out, the guy from Washington Gas told us that in our neighborhood, they're not even pumping the right flow of gas to really gas any of our houses properly. When he said that, I don't think he understood what he was really saying. So we're paying and we're not even getting the proper gas flow that we're supposed to get. And mortgage wise, so it's over $200,000 in mortgages. And we can see this play out in a few ways, that people don't think they're necessarily in debt as people rent out their basements or Airbnb their homes or part of their homes just to pay off mortgages. And to bring it wider again, if you look at a lot of the new administration's plans, is for home ownership again, because they're afraid they don't want a housing crisis along with this debt crisis. because it's going to be a real crisis. I hate to use crisis so many in all the sentences. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's a really vast problem, and we are in a place where like we're having these conversations to really start on uplifting stuff, because food insecurity is up. Like there's waits at food banks. Like luckily DC is in a good place where we are helping each other out by doing our mutual aid work. And that's one thing that I call, if you are able, if you have time or treasure or anything, help get involved in a mutual aid network in your ward, because that food sometimes, because people are picking like food, or people are picking medicine payments and other payments over food. So we just need to help really just get everything out to people. So thank you.
Hi. Okay, so thank you, Zilla. And right now we would like to introduce, and we're very happy to have uh, Yasmine Arrington. So welcome, Yasmine.
Thank you, Ampson.
I can read a quick bio for you really quick too. I'll introduce you if that's okay.
Sorry about
that.
Yeah, sure.
Yasmine's going to speak with us tonight about carceral and judicial deaths. Yasmine was born and raised in Washington, D.C., and is a graduate of Elon University with a Bachelor of Arts in Strategic Communications and History, and Howard University School of Divinity, where she earned her Master of Divinity degree. Yasmine is the author of Daily Reflections for Social Entrepreneurs Journal. Her work has been featured in Teen Vogue, Essence, Black Enterprise, Forbes Magazine, The Washington Post, and the Baltimore Times, and on ABC 7 News, WJLA, and NBC4 for her community work with ScholarCHIPS, a nonprofit organization she created that provides college scholarships, mentoring, and a peer support network to children of incarcerated parents, inspiring them to complete their college education. So thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Hope and Ampson. Can you all hear me well? Okay. So I have till about 7:31. Wow. Carceral debt is there are a lot of nuances within carceral debt and judicial debt. Another term for carceral debt is prison debt. I will say this up front as a disclaimer. I do not claim to be an expert of all things prison industrial complex and mass incarceration. However, I've been in this space of, for lack of a better term, criminal justice and juvenile justice reform for about 10 years now. I am the founder and executive director of ScholarCHIPS, Inc., which is a nonprofit in DC. And our mission is to provide college scholarships, mentoring, and a support network to children of incarcerated parents, inspiring them to complete their college degree, their college education. And so to date, we've served 71 scholars. We've awarded well over $250,000 in college scholarships to these students. That includes book award. We also give book awards, graduation gifts for students who graduate from college. And we have an emergency fund. And as you can imagine, children of incarcerated parents face lots of financial challenges before they get to college and even during college. And so there are emergencies that come up. So we do fill tuition gaps. We do, if a student needs technology, we'll provide that technology. But what I want to just start and just briefly mention some things I think are important to highlight on a macro level. And then I'll briefly cover some things and share some statistics and information with you about issues that returning citizens are dealing with in the district and across the country, which challenges that are keeping them in debt, which ultimately keeps them in a cycle of poverty. So the prison industrial complex, or the criminal, some people say injustice system, they truly are systems, and it's driven by the idea of punishment and not rehabilitation. If our systems were truly built on the belief that people should be rehabilitated, and if we focused our resources on rehabilitation, then we would not see as many people who were incarcerated and have been released returning back to prison, right? So we would have lower recidivism rates if we really focused on, whether it's, just from the top down. We're talking about our prison wardens, we're talking about our POs, our officers, we're talking about the agency, the supervision agencies, right? And I personally believe, just from my own experience, from my father being incarcerated in and out of jail and prison my entire life, from the time I was about 2 years old till this very day. My father's currently incarcerated and I'm 28 years old. So I've seen many things. And of course, in working and supporting our young scholars, I end up becoming more involved in their lives and in their family lives. The criminal justice system is a disenfranchising system. And as I mentioned, in many ways, it perpetuates cycles of poverty for Black people, for people of color, and poor people. And a lot of times those identities sort of overlap. Unfortunately, the way our system is set up, long after people serve their sentences, their punishment continues within our society. And a lot of this has to do with the laws, policies that are in place that are outdated. And I think that I hope that the current administration, takes that seriously, and that will be one of their priorities. And so unfortunately, the formerly incarcerated, or some may call them returning citizens, they really face crippling prison debt. And prison debt can look like a few different things. And I see I only have 2 minutes, but I may just need just a couple more minutes. So here's a story from the slate.com that I want to share with you really quickly. When David Silva returned from prison in 2006 from serving 38 months in a New Jersey state prison for offenses related to his substance abuse, he faced more than $35,000 in debt. He didn't owe his money to private creditors. He was in debt to the government for his prosecutions and stints in prison. Silva's debts for use of the criminal justice system included public defender fees, various surcharges that went to things such as police reforms and drug use prevention, and probation supervision fees, as well as restitution fees and fines. Silva's debts also included about $10,000 for substance abuse treatment he received in prison. Though he was working full-time when he got out, the amounts owed were so crushing and were a barrier to meeting his basic needs. His debt also precluded him from getting a driver's license, which ultimately makes it harder for him to get back on his feet. Silva ultimately filed for bankruptcy. The Fines and Fees Justice Center has done a lot of extensive research on the fines and fees that returning citizens face after they return from prison. When a person fails to comply with their probation by not paying court debt or fees for court-ordered programs, they may be incarcerated again. And their terms of probation may be extended for months or years, and they can be subjected to additional sanctions, which are likely to increase their court debt. So you see, it's a very strange cycle. But in DC, this is not just for the adult returning citizens, but also for young people, who we call juveniles. I hate to use that term, but young people and adults in the system, when they get on when they enter into probation, all of our incarcerated individuals and those who are returning are under the supervision of what's called CSOSA. It stands for Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency. Many a times they will have to pay for those ankle monitors. Sometimes they call it the box. And sometimes people who are who are on probation have to pay for the classes. There's a whole, process that they have to go through. And I guess this is our way of, quote unquote, rehabilitating. But there are different courses that they have to take, such as anger management. There may be a substance abuse class. And so the idea is that they are training and helping folks to break out of cycles, or break out of past trauma, or, basically equip them with tools in their toolbox to be successful in life. But at the same time, they're being charged to take these classes. And if you're a returning citizen and you already have court fees that you owe for supervision fees are a real thing where people are charged to be on supervision. It's just a very strange system. And at least 67,000, there are at least 67,000 DC residents. And I'm sure the number is much higher now. And about 10% of the population are estimated to have a criminal conviction record. And approximately 2,800 are released from incarceration annually. And so I will stop now to pass the baton on, but I would like to share with you that there is the DC Policy Center. There was a gentleman who was a fellow there and wrote an amazing piece that is very revealing if you want to get more into the barriers that returning citizens face when it comes to employment, when it comes to housing, and other financial opportunities, and the barriers that they face. This article is called "Obstacles to Employment for Returning Citizens in DC," and it's via the DC Policy Center. I'll put this link, I'll copy and paste this link and put it in the chat box. But thank you all for the opportunity to share with you this evening.
Thank you, Yasmine. All right. Our next speaker is Adrian Rakochi. He's going to speak with us about medical debt. Adrian is a Baltimore City resident and co-chair of the Health Justice Committee of the Greater Baltimore Democratic Socialists of America. He has helped lead the committee in work with coalition partners on harm reduction legislation, single payer advocacy, and establishing fair financial practices for patients. His professional background is in research in cognition and mental health. Thank you for being with us tonight, Adrian.
Thank you so much, Hope, and thank you everyone for having me. And it is great to be in company with you all. So as Hope had mentioned, I'm co-chair of the Greater Baltimore Democratic Socialists of America Health Justice Committee, and I've been working on medical debt advocacy since mid-2019. Years fly by when we're, under this pandemic. And so we began organizing around this issue in 2019. And we were working with National Nurses United on a lot of this, and they commissioned a report on medical debt. And it was really eye-opening, and it found that each lawsuit that these hospitals are suing patients for has only about $1,000 to $1,200 worth of debt that it's collecting. And it's a significant burden for patients and their families, and yet for these hospitals, the income from the lawsuits is only about 5% of their net income. And so this is giving hospitals outsized power over the individuals that they're supposed to serve. And we've also noted that through Maryland's all-payer system, in which hospitals they're given a certain amount of funds every year for financial assistance to give to their patients, there appears to be money that is being pocketed, because it's on record that the amount of financial assistance given to patients is actually less than what the hospital received. And here in Baltimore, Johns Hopkins in particular has been very egregious in their treatment of patients and the community. And they have sued Black individuals who live in the areas surrounding the medical campus disproportionately. The zip code that has the largest amount of lawsuits from Johns Hopkins is 90% Black and suffers from a poverty rate that is 3 times the state average. And this is likely a strategy to aid in their development efforts around the medical campus by displacing families who file for bankruptcy. And there was a similar displacement of Black families by Johns Hopkins in the 1950s. And statewide, people of color are sued for medical debt at higher rates than the state average, and a sizable number of hospitals are suing their employees for the debt that they incur at their place of employment as a patient. And so recently we've been organizing around statewide legislation in Maryland, HB 656 and Senate Bill 514, which would establish policy that would make hospitals first negotiate a payment plan before moving to sue, as well as prohibiting lawsuits that are under $1,000, which would take care of, approximately 50% of the debts that people are suffering under. And in our current for-profit healthcare system, hospitals hold a great amount of power, both as an enterprise and as a healthcare facility, over Black and working class communities. And with legislation, we're hoping to correct this power imbalance in favor of communities, patients, and their well-being. And I'm just going to share a link in the chat with the report that I mentioned and some flyers about this organizing effort that we're doing that's relevant to Prince George's County and Montgomery County. And we'd love for anybody who's interested to, hop on this effort with us. So thank you very much for having me, and I will pass it back.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Adrian, for leading us into that sort of intro on medical debt. And now we would like to introduce our fourth speaker, Dante O'Hara, who will speak to us about student debt. So Dante O'Hara is a materials engineer in Washington, D.C. He's originally from Southern California, and he graduated from the University of California at Riverside with his PhD in materials engineering in 2019, with about $90,000 of student loan debt, approximately $25,000 in debt from financing a car, and more than $10,000 of credit card debt. Dante is an organizer and active member of the Claudia Jones School of Political Education, Science for the People, as well, and the Debt Collective. Thank you, Dante, for speaking with us.
Thanks, Ampson. So I'm doing the tech at the same time. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming out. Yeah, as Ampson said, I'm also an organizer with the Claudia Jones School. We're basically providing the tech for this event. And we also work closely with the Poor People's Campaign and the Debt Collective, obviously. So we know debt is a serious issue here in DC and across this country and around the world as well, if we tie in US imperialism and economic sanctions on the global South. So yeah, so anyways, yeah, just based off of the great intro, I'm a scientist or engineer. I suffer from student debts, and a lot of folks are afraid to talk about these things, especially in my area of study and my career. People think they make a ton of money being an engineer or scientist, but that's honestly not the real truth. It's honestly a myth. I think a lot of folks' debt to income ratio is much higher than they want to believe. So like myself, yeah, as Ampson mentioned, I'm nearly $90,000 in debt from a combination of my graduate studies and undergraduate studies. And my mother also has a Parent Plus loan, which is about $10,000. So if you add that together, it's about $100,000. And yeah, I have a car as well that, my old car from graduate school broke down. So I had to, buy a new car, get a car loan, all these issues, and then, credit cards, because I don't get paid enough in grad school to survive. It's like you can hardly eat. For example, I was on food stamps my first 2 years of grad school because I couldn't afford food. So, and I know this issue is not uncommon. I'm sure there's folks on this call that can relate. I'm sure folks on this call probably have more debt than what I'm speaking of. So solidarity with you, and I'm sure folks are here to, have a space where they can talk about these things. So yeah, there's a new basically a bubble that's about to burst, similar to the subprime mortgage crisis of 2008. And this is now the student debt crisis, which is $1.7 trillion of a total of student loan debt across this country. Majority of those borrowers are Black students or Black former students, particularly Black women who suffer from this debt. So it is racialized. And for those of us who understand this history of the racialization of debts, debt has been a form of reaction and punishments and a predatory form of inclusion, going back to the counter-revolution at the end of Reconstruction, which forced our people into sharecropping, tenant farming, and debt pinnage through carceral forms like convict leasing. So this is all related. Same goes for education, which I'm speaking of here, where college was virtually free, tuition free until the mid to late 1960s, where demonstrations and uprisings were happening all across the University of California system, fighting for Black and Chicano studies on campuses, led by the Brown Berets and the Black Panther Party. And then the reaction by the UC Regents, which is the wealthy donor class of the UC system, and I speak on the UC system because that's what I come from. And the current governor at that time, Ronald Reagan, who also had fired Angela Davis from her teaching job at UCLA for being a member of the Communist Party, targeted these Black and brown students by charging tuition costs on the basis of their inclusion to the schools. So basically, it's like, yeah, you can come into these schools now as Black and brown students, you can get your Black studies and Chicano studies, etc., but you have to start paying fees to now go to these schools. So now it's no longer a public university. Now it's basically the sort of public-private partnership that we know of, or basically a private school as well. So the dismantling of our so-called public institutions is a racist, neoliberal austerity project to further and further squeeze the working class of this country into less forms of wealth and more forms of debt, so that this country can continue benefiting the rich and continue funding imperialist aggression across the globe. So anyways, I'll wrap up. So thank you for all of you tuning in tonight. And for those who are suffering, I want to say that you are not alone. That is, the kind of campaign slogan of the Debt Collective. 100 folks from the Debt Collective, which is a debtors union, and also a national militant debtors organization, are currently striking their student debt and have pledged to not pay once the moratorium ends in October of this year, and are also not paying currently because they simply cannot afford it. The president, 46 now, has the power to cancel all of federal student debt without Congress through the Compromise and Settlement Clause granted through the Higher Education Act of 1965. So we will fight him until he does it. No one needs to continue suffering in silence from this debt, and we all need to get organized into debtors unions to leverage our money and our power as a collective. And I also want to give a shout out to the tuition strikers at Columbia University. We stand in solidarity with you, and thank you to everyone that's on this call. And I'll pass it back to the facilitators.
Thank you, Dante. Thank you for all of that. That was all to all of our speakers. That was very comprehensive. And thank you to Dante for bringing up the Claudia Jones School for Political Education. We definitely owe them a huge thank you because we wouldn't have a platform without them tonight. So we're gonna, for the next, I think until about 8:10, we're gonna have some potentially smaller conversations. I did want to throw that out to my co-organizers. Are we thinking maybe breaking into 2 small breakout groups, or would we want to keep it with everyone together? I'll let us ruminate on that, but I'll set up some expectations for what we're going to talk about. You've likely noticed many of us have named and claimed our debts and our debt amounts. We do this to try and establish that this is a safe space where we can talk about our debts without shame. And we'd encourage everyone to share as much about their debt situation as they feel comfortable. We've also prepared a few questions to prompt discussion in our groups, and we'll be coming back at about 8:10 for a debrief. We'll be kind of discussing everything, or getting an overview of what we've discussed. I think I'm gonna do one little suggestion, kind of like as a Zoom tool. since we're all here in conversation together digitally. Sometimes it's helpful to use this method called stacking, which is a way to kind of let people know in the chat that you'd like to speak up, and then that way we're not all unmuting and speaking over each other and things. So if at any point in the conversation you'd like to speak, you can simply type stack in the chat, or I think sometimes people do like an asterisk or something like that to simplify. And then everyone can kind of keep an eye on that and kind of have an idea of who'd like to speak next, and then maybe an eventual queue if a bunch of people are like wanting to speak. And so we have a few questions we'd like everybody to ruminate over in our groups. Okay, yeah, I think we'll be doing some smaller groups. So we recommend everybody start with an icebreaker. So everybody introduce themselves, share their pronouns, where they're from. I think most of us are from DC, but let us know if you're not, or if you're, of course, area people, DMV. And maybe a fun question, like what's your sign, or what's your favorite childhood movie? Yeah. And then we have a few debt related questions we are going to put out to everybody. Do you know how long it'll take to eliminate all of your debt? Do you think you should pay for it? Is number 2. Number 3, did you grow up with any debt in your household? What was considered good debt or bad debt? Or was that, how were these kind of distinctions made or drawn, or what was your impression of them? Number 4, why aren't these things that we go into debt for public goods? And for those who don't have any debt, what could you be doing to be an ally to debtors if you have no debt? All right, so we're gonna go into groups. We'll reconvene at 8:10 for a debrief.
And we'll put these questions in the chat. So once we break out to breakout groups, you will be able to see these questions again.
Yes, thank you, Ampson.